Good to see you. I want to thank the Rotary for having me back. I was here in I think January or February, and a hell of a lot has changed since then. So it's good to be back. It's good to see some familiar faces. I was thinking when Mike asked me to speak, I was thinking about kind of where I would start, and I was telling him I think the first place that I would probably start is March 8th of this year. I was scrolling through my Twitter feed and I saw that the BNP Paribas Open had been canceled down in Indian Wells. And I'm a big tennis fan. That is the 5th largest tennis tournament in the world. After the 4 Grand Slams, it goes BNP and then Miami. And for whatever reason, it didn't dawn on me at the time that that was a significant moment. Because right after that, I think the NBA canceled its season or postponed its season, and you saw the entire sports world just kind of get put on hold. And a couple days around that time, we had every day for the print version of the Daily Press, we get a list sent to us of stories from the Associated Press or the USA Today network that would be good for like national stories, international stories, things like that. And around that same time that the tournament was canceled, every single story, I mean, there were so many world events going on, things nationally that were happening that were important. Everything became coronavirus and then eventually COVID-19. And I was having a chat with our former night editor at the time, a couple days later, and he was really concerned about the fact that at that moment we were at like probably 65% of the paper was coronavirus related stories, and we were having a big discussion, heated discussion, he and I, over kind of like how to balance that out, whether or not that was the right thing to do at that time. And at that moment, we hadn't even had our first case in San Bernardino County yet. And so we were talking about that, trying to figure out how to go forward with it, how to keep the content balanced in terms of what we were offering. And I think a day later, it went from 65% to 100% coronavirus content. Yeah. And I think that was the day we also had our first case locally. And I was telling Brad at MDHQMD earlier, I said, when I've only been back to the Daily Press since December as the editor, and a lot has changed in that time. I'm learning a lot about what power I have and what power I don't have, especially the latter. But one of my fears early on when I got back was whether or not we would be able to handle a situation that kind of called for all of our resources. We're a very small staff at the moment, and I was mainly worried about like if a fire had happened, like another Blue Cut fire. When the Blue Cut fire happened in 2016, every reporter in the newsroom, there was probably 7 or 8 of us at the time, we dropped everything and we were in all various spots of the high desert, kind of covering either evacuation centers, or we had a reporter and a photographer on the front lines with the firefighters. I went up to Wrightwood and almost got stuck there because they were shutting down the town. So we were all over the place. And now, in our current moment, we have 2 news reporters and 1 guy who does sports and a little bit of news. And I was wondering if another fire broke out like that, how would we handle that? And it concerned me, and it turned out it wasn't a fire. It was this virus that was going to be the thing that kind of tested who we are and what we do. And I have to say, I really do think we met the challenge. We haven't gotten everything. I don't think we ever will. I don't think anybody ever will. But I think, given our circumstances, we've risen to that challenge. And one of the things that I'd like to talk about is, especially early on, when there was a lot more doubt and uncertainty surrounding this entire thing. I had a conversation with my team and I let them know basically that we were not going to be the type of news organization that, I don't know, not freaks out, that over-sensationalizes anything. A while back, I made the decision that if we have a story that we're covering that is kind of rapidly moving, whether it's the fireworks being canceled in Victorville or something like that, we weren't going to go onto Facebook or Twitter or anything like that with all capital letters and say breaking, because that comes with certain connotations that could be negative. We use developing and we leave it lowercase. This is a story we're looking at. You don't need to be alarmed, but here's what we know. And I told them that with the coronavirus in mind, that we were never going to, there were certain words that we were never going to use in our reporting, especially in our headlines, because a lot of people just see the headline and that's as far as they take it. And it was around the time that schools were shutting down. We had been working on that story kind of all morning. And so I knew, after talking with Ted Alejandre and a few other folks, that the entire public school system in San Bernardino County was going to shut down. Our competitors over at DB&G, they were kind of fed press releases by each individual school throughout the day. And I was watching their site versus our site as we were going through this, and we had one story that kind of covered everything, and they were kind of reacting to each press release that came through. And each one that they put online came with a headline that read something similar to, Apple Valley Unified School District closes amid fear of coronavirus. And that is one word that I'm happy to say we never used in a headline was fear. We don't know that that's true. We don't know that people are fearful or that the schools were shut down out of fear. We know that there's concern. We know that this is a growing pandemic, but we don't know about the fear. And fear comes with, when you read fear, that tells you something, and you react in a certain way. And nothing against those guys. They do good work, but I just know that for us, we were never going to do something like that, because the way that they work on those school stories, they ended up having multiple stories in a row, all with the word fear. And it was just like, you look at their homepage and it's just fear, 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 fear. And that's not something that we want to really say or promote or anything, because that's really not why we're here. Our job is to inform people to the best of our ability what is happening in our community, whether it's coronavirus or something else. I look at the coronavirus, and I've gotten emails from people who say that we're fear mongers, whether we put fear in the headline or not. I've gotten emails from people when we miss a day on the new cases from San Bernardino County who ask us why we didn't have the numbers that day. It kind of runs the gamut on people who are completely sick and tired of it and don't care, and people who are concerned and really do want those daily updates. The one thing I can say is that we're definitely not doing it because we're making money off of it, because we're not. We, like a lot of other businesses, have been hit very hard by the pandemic. On top of that, we are not yet, our website is not yet under a paywall. It will be soon. That is a change that's coming shortly, probably within the next couple months. But our online numbers have definitely increased. I think the last time I was here, I talked to you guys a little bit about that and my goals for the year to increase readership. And I've already done it. I guess the coronavirus did it, but we're already beyond the numbers that we did for the entirety of 2019. In 2020, it's hundreds and hundreds of percents above average. It continues to be that way through some of the BLM protests and the riots and stuff that came along with that. But there's really no revenue that comes from that because we don't have a paywall. That information is there for free. And most news sites anyway were at least giving the coronavirus news that they had. They were lowering the paywall for that because it's public. There's public health and public safety involved, and I agree with that. Even if we had a paywall, at that time I would have taken that down. I think it's good that people, I think, are getting engaged. I think early on I didn't know what to think about all of this. It hadn't hit me personally in any way, and so when something like that happens and you have no kind of direct connection to it, it is hard to empathize with people, believe a lot of the things that you're hearing, and you do want to question them always. But there is a level of truth that comes with all of this, and this is a very real situation that we're working through that I don't think any of us have ever seen before. It's destroying parts of our economy. My favorite bar in Victorville is shut down for good. It's never going to reopen. We have people who are genuinely, their families are hurt by this. Their families have seen tragedy from this. The mayor pro tem in Adelanto is a perfect example. He seems to be starting to recover from his bout with the virus, but his mom died from it. And so that is where I think you start to see the differences in perspective. Because Gerardo Hernandez, the mayor pro tem in Adelanto, his wife has become kind of like this advocate for everything that public health officials have talked to us about. Face covering, social distancing, hand washing, all that kind of stuff. And when San Bernardino County started to reopen its businesses, she was very much an advocate against that. Because in her own home, she sees what can happen when this virus hits someone who's vulnerable. And so when Gerardo was still in an ICU, I messaged her because she was giving daily updates on Facebook and posting videos. She didn't have to. She'll be the first one to tell you that she's a mother more first, and the wife of an elected official second. But she really stood up, I think, to the challenge of just information and informing people and letting people into a part of her life that in a normal situation would be mostly private. We don't talk to each other a lot about our health issues and whether or not we're in the hospital or anything like that. Those are private matters for family. And she opened up her family life to the public of the high desert. And I reached out to her on Facebook and I said, we're obviously going to have a reporter write about this and stay up to date on Gerardo's condition. But I said, just from a personal perspective, as a member of the community, I want to thank you for being as open as you have been. To me, that was a very brave thing for her to do. And to gain the support that she has, that she's gotten from the community, I think is a wonderful thing. I think it's something that we can learn from. I don't think it's necessarily the way that everyone needs to act in a situation like this, but that's how she chose to act, and I thought it was admirable. And I think it's one of those things where it allows you an entry point into understanding the virus from a different perspective. We had a couple stories early on where we were talking to people who had the virus and were willing to talk. Rick Herrick was one of them, the mayor up in Big Bear. He was very open about his situation. His was never as dire as other people's. I think he did get a little bit sicker as his case kind of progressed. But he managed it, and he wasn't as open as the Hernandez family, but he was he gave us a glimpse into the virus, as did a woman from Running Springs who agreed to an interview with one of our freelancers. She had the virus. She wanted people to kind of see it from her perspective. She started posting daily videos. We wrote a couple articles about her, and it gives a human element to all of this that I think is probably largely lacking when we talk about the virus. We have so much data and numbers and figures surrounding the virus that we report every day, that we see all over the place. It's hard to find that human connection there. And I think it was the New York Times that recently ran a list of like a portion of the names of the 100,000 people at that time that had died of the virus, and they ran that on their front page. And it's, I think from one perspective you could see that as a political statement that the Times was making. I think from my standpoint, I saw it as a very powerful statement of just, let's not forget that these are real people, and that there are lives that have been lost, and there are lives that have been forever damaged by this. Because it's very easy to just go in every day, get the numbers, all right, what's Johns Hopkins saying, what's the county saying, how many cases are in Riverside County versus San Bernardino County, what's Newsom saying about all this, what's he going to close next? You lose a lot of, I think you can grow numb to it, I did. After a certain point, it just became data to me. And when you see certain things like the Times did, which I thought was a bold move, whether you agree with it or not, their entire front page was just a list of names. It's a bold move. I didn't think of it. I kind of wish I had, but it gives you a chance to reconnect, I think, to the human element of all this. But the other thing that the virus kind of inherently took away the human element from us. We haven't been able to do this that much. Meet in public, talk to each other. Handshaking has kind of gone out the window. I think I shook one person's hand today. But before that, I don't remember the last time I shook someone's hand. And it's a weird time to try to process all of that, because I think a lot about, in my profession, just there are certain things inherent to our profession that make it imperfect. And I'm okay with those imperfections, but there are just things that go along with, like, a breaking news story. You're reporting, you're trying to gain as much information as you can, and you're reporting those facts as quickly as you can in a rough draft version of something that you need to get out to the community. There's bound to be either something lacking in that, or something that maybe you got wrong. Any number of things can go wrong in that process, and it's a very tenuous process. But we continue to forge ahead with it, because that's also the nature of the business. We don't stop. We've all been working from home since probably the middle of March. There are a few people in the Daily Press office. There's someone up front to answer the phones as much as she can. Janet in circulation is still there. But the advertising department and the editorial department, which I'm in charge of, we haven't been in the office since, I think, March 17th or 18th, something like that. And that was a directive from Gannett, our parent company. They were being very cautious with this entire situation, and we still haven't gotten word on when we can go back. I think it's kind of silly from a personal standpoint, because there's 4 of us. We can socially distance pretty well in that newsroom. So, but I think no matter the personal feelings toward it, I'm all for wearing a face mask. I used to think face masks were really weird. I would see people wearing them, and I'd be like, why are they doing that? It didn't register with me. Why, that someone would have maybe a health issue that makes them more vulnerable. I'm a relatively healthy person, so it's rare for me to think about those things. But the virus has kind of opened my eyes to the fact of how vulnerable we all can be. And so now wearing a face mask has just become second nature. I had one walking in today. It is weird, though, how different areas of the country, I think, are responding to this. I think in San Bernardino County, it's a mix. I think you have people who are genuinely very concerned and taking this very seriously. I think you have other people who are kind of just sick of it, want it to be over. I think we all are, actually. But, and don't see it as a real threat to their lives. And I think that's fine either way. I was furloughed from work 1 week. 1 week in April, 1 week in May, and then 1 week in June, which was like last week, or the week before. And for the first 2 furloughs, which was basically Monday through Sunday, I'm not allowed to work and I'm not paid. And that was an attempt for the company to kind of save money as this whole thing kind of plays out. So the first 2 months I couldn't do anything because everything was closed in April and May. I couldn't go anywhere, so I just kind of sat at home. But in June, for my June furlough, my girlfriend and I went to Grand Teton National Park, and we went to Yellowstone National Park. And neither of us had ever been there, but we both love car travel, car trips. In 2017, we went to Louisiana by car, which was really fun in a Prius. So we decided that we were going to go to Wyoming, hit Utah, hit Idaho, those kinds of places. And when we got to Jackson, Wyoming, where we were staying, we went into the bar that was in the hotel that we were staying at, and I was talking to the bartender, and it was the first bar that I'd been in since probably February. And I told him that, and he goes, yeah, we get a lot of it. He said, are you from California? And I said, yeah, I am. He goes, yeah, everyone from California hasn't been in a bar in a long time. And I said, well, they're starting to open up right now, but there's a possibility that things might start shutting down again because we're starting to see spikes in cases. And he said, oh, that's a bunch of crap. You know, like, let everything reopen was his kind of mantra about this whole thing. And I can understand that from an economic perspective. But there's a big difference between even our county, where we have, I think, over the weekend we reported 1,700 new cases. So we're up to 15,000 something, 15,000 and change, 269 deaths. It is a small percentage of our community, but it is also prevalent in our community. And I don't think that the testing is perfect, because you look at a place like Lucerne Valley, 5,000-6,000 people live there, not one active case of coronavirus, not one confirmed case, I should say. And a lot of that has to do with testing. If you look at the county dashboard, there's not one test that has been conducted in Lucerne Valley either. The same goes for Oro Grande, the same goes for Hellendale. These places, I think the idea, I don't know if this is true or not, we're working on getting more information on this, but I believe that if you're in a place like Oro Grande, or if you're in a place like Lucerne Valley, the idea was that you would go to the nearest testing location, which would be in Victorville or Apple Valley for Lucerne Valley, Victorville for Oro Grande, or if you want to go to Barstow. So it's not perfect, and I don't think that's being too critical. I'm not trying to throw blame on anybody. It's a horrible situation to be thrust into as public health officials, especially when you're probably understaffed. But for going back to Jackson, for that bartender, it's not the same situation. I think in their county they had 10 cases, no deaths, 10 total cases. He probably didn't know anybody with the coronavirus. I personally know 4 people who have either had or currently have the virus, between friends and family. And I think we probably at some point all will if we don't already. So it's interesting seeing just how different people react to it. It's the human nature obviously always is ongoing and shows itself. When our last day of our trip, we were in Salt Lake City, and I'd never been there before, and I was really surprised at how kind of like metropolitan and urban Salt Lake City is. We were in a bar one night, and like a Black Lives Matter protest just went by down the street, and I was like, all right, well, I didn't even get to see any of the ones around here because I would send my reporters out, and then I'm back at my kitchen table editing the paper to get out. So we're there, and it's just really strange how either really strict some people are or really lenient some people are, because we went to probably 3 bars the night we were there, and every bar except for one, if you walked in without your face mask on, they made you walk out, put your face mask on, come back in with it on, and then once you're inside, you can immediately take it off. I don't know how that helps anything, but you know, that's the way they were doing it. And I think for the businesses, a lot of people are just trying to get by. You know, they're just trying to, if there's a mandate or there's a health order or something like that, all right, let's try to follow this as much as we can. There's really not, I don't think, this is probably more of a personal opinion, I don't think there's a lot that can be done if they don't anyway. Newsom has task force out now, kind of like monitoring things, but when you look at the overall situation, there was really nothing stopping businesses from reopening whenever the hell they wanted to. I think, you know, the gym in Victorville is a perfect example of that. The defiance of the county's health order. And, you know, there was a way that the owner of the gym went about that. You know, I think reopening, personally, I get it. Like, I'd like to reopen, and I'd like our customers to be able to come back into our office. We haven't done that yet, but so be it. I understand the need to reopen, but if you're not familiar with the situation, on social media, the owner of the gym started lashing out against people for being critical of him for reopening, and he said some things that I don't think I've ever seen any business owner say to certain people in the community who were just kind of expressing their concern. As far as the opening itself, I understand it. It's the response to how that happened that really kind of threw me for a loop. But what it showed me more than anything, because we had an article on that. We tried to get the owner of the gym to talk to us on the record. He didn't talk to us that night, so we ran a story without any additional comment from him. But we had a response from the county, and we had a response from the city of Victorville. And it was, you know, that they were appalled, and this is insane, and they have 3 days to shut down. Well, in 3 days they didn't shut down, and nothing happened. And that's when I started to look at what is keeping us doing what we're doing, other than our own kind of like, you know, either personal morals or beliefs that maybe we want to keep other people safe. Because I've talked to several friends who have businesses in the high desert of various sizes, and you know, they say, yeah, you know, I've stayed open, but kind of like on kind of hush hush or whatever, but I got to make money. I've got family to feed and everything, and the sheriff's department, I think the deputies understand that. So when they go and talk to these guys, one of my friends told me, he was just like, I'm not gonna cite you, I'm not gonna write you up or anything, just, you know, keep on trucking, basically. And I think the sheriff's department early on said that it was either that they were gonna not enforce a lot of the mandates, or it would be hard to enforce the mandates. And, you know, so I think for a good amount of time, everyone was just kind of complying because they knew it was the right thing to do. And I was surprised that no other businesses that I know of that, you know, kind of have a lot of people congregating like a gym would, you know, also reopened in the same way that the gym did. But there's always going to be defiance in some way. I think Cafe 247 in Lucerne Valley is a good example, because they have their sign out front of their business on 247, and they've used that sign to, like, now, you know, talk about political messaging, and talking about how they're basically offering their feelings on not being able to operate, you know, and they're not, they don't shy away from some pretty ugly language. Whiskey Barrel in Victorville, on their digital marquee recently had FU&K Newsom. And, you know, it's a reminder also that we live in America. We do have free speech, and people can say whatever the hell they want, and it's a wonderful thing. You hope that people are still keeping the safety of others in mind, but the fact that we can say the things that we want and have other people listen and possibly understand that, I think is a good thing. I don't think we need to be just blindly following anybody right now. I mean, early on, everyone said that the virus would be dead by July because it would be too hot for it. Well, that didn't happen. I mean, I think it's very clear that there's a lot of people involved, well-intentioned, smart people who still don't know the full effects or the full extent of what this is. I was talking to my brother just the other day. He's a nurse, was based in Arizona, outside of Phoenix, but he's moving back. He's going to be living in Redlands. He works at St. Bernardine's, and while he was in Arizona, he wasn't working for like probably March through May. He wasn't working. There was no work because nobody was going to the ERs, and they had very few coronavirus cases. So once Arizona reopened, you start to see cases shoot up. All of a sudden, he's working double shifts. He's got no time off, all this kind of stuff. But what he told me the other day is now they're starting to look at whether or not the virus it has a bacterial element to it that is being spread. He's saying they're seeing some cases where there's correlations between certain bacteria and the virus itself. The WHO just released a report today, I think, where they're looking at the possibility of the virus being airborne or being spread through the air. So there's a constant change in what we know and what we think we know and what we don't know. And going back to that whole fear-mongering idea of all this, I think if there was anything I could say to anyone in the community that I could stress the most, it's that that's not why we're here. Everyone who works at the paper lives in this community and cares about this community and wants to see this community thrive. We have no reason to scare anyone or any desire to scare anyone. Every article that I put online, they have to go with certain taxonomies that place it in a certain spot on the website. And for every coronavirus case, the taxonomies I use are, we have one for coronavirus that was made after all this started. So it goes into a coronavirus section, and then I add public safety to it, and I add healthcare to it. And those are the only three I put on there. Because to me, those are the issues that are at hand with this virus. You have a healthcare angle, whether it's hospitalization rates, surge bed capacity, ICUs, things like that. You also have a public safety angle. I think people in our community do need to know where the vast majority of cases are. In our daily updates, for us, the high desert includes anywhere from Phelan to 29 Palms. But within that, you have the Victor Valley, which has the vast majority of cases for the high desert. I think it's definitely over 80% of all the cases in the high desert are located in, the Victor Valley plus Barstow. And that can sound scary, but when you put things in context and you provide a little bit of context and nuance for people, it gives you, I think, a better understanding of what's going on. Because while we have, I think, this is the last time I checked, which was last week, there were probably 1,600 cases in the entire high desert. Well, there's over 12 or 1,300 cases in Ontario alone. Rancho Cucamonga has more than 1,000 cases. So whenever you put things into perspective, you start to see kind of the extent of what you're dealing with. I do think that because of where we live and because a lot of our communities are already kind of spaced out a little bit more than others, we're doing a little bit better than other communities. I don't know if that's true or not. It's just my perception based on what we're seeing. You look at places like New York where the vast majority of cases have occurred, and that's a very, kind of like close quarters, especially in New York City. But, I looked at 23 deaths in the high desert in the vast larger area of the high desert. Out of 269 is fairly low, I would say. You don't want to see any death like that. And believe it or not, journalists don't want to see that either, especially in their own communities. Those are hard numbers to report. There's been a few times as this goes on, and for a while there I was working 7 days a week, just making sure everything was up to date on a daily basis. It wears on you. My girlfriend has a friend who's a former police officer. He was a detective in Adelanto for a time, and she was interviewing him for an article that she wrote for her school when she was in J school, and his story is basically, the short version of it is that he lost his job as a detective with the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department because he beat a confession out of a person. And her whole article was trying to look at the nuance of a decision like that. Okay, so the next day's news item would be San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department detective, relieved of duty after beating a confession out of someone. Years later, as everyone's allowed to reflect on that and understand it from a different perspective, you get a more nuanced version of the story. You learn that the confession that he beat out of this person was the confession that this person had molested his 3-month-old daughter. You learn that that child was severely injured during that, to the point where bones were fractured and she was in an ER. You learn that this is also a detective who has seen, for the most part in his career, the worst of society on a daily basis. Going into houses that he's been to multiple times for domestic violence calls, and going into that same house one more time and finding a dead 12-year-old who had been shot in the face. All these things factor into that. And it's the one thing that I think breaking news and like the news of the moment and that 24-hour news cycle, which we're all kind of beholden to now, don't get at, is the nuance of something and the complexities of something. That same, kind of like vanished detective is now a therapist who makes $100K a year hearing confessions from people about their own personal lives. And he helps them through therapy, through traumatic experiences, and how to handle traumatic experiences. So the story is never done. The story continues. And it's the same thing, I think, with this virus. Even people who have one opinion one day, their opinion could change the next day just based on things that happen to them. I know that early on, I didn't take it seriously, and my view on this whole thing has changed quite dramatically. Either through knowing people who got the virus, seeing how other people who have friends and family who got the virus have been impacted emotionally from it, and spiritually and mentally. You realize that it is a very real thing, even if it isn't hitting you, and if it's not, even if it doesn't affect you ever. You never get the virus, you never have symptoms. I'm a very healthy person. I don't remember, quite honestly, the last time I went to the doctor. I don't know where I would go if I needed to. But I know a lot of people that are not as lucky as me. And so I do think it's my job to be as safe as I can, to just basically do my part. I am sick of the commercials though. Those commercials got very old very quickly for me. Heroes and doing your part and all that kind of stuff. So, but I'm fine to take any questions or anything you guys want to talk about.
This may not be a question you can answer, but when you publish these statistics of cases in the various cities, Victorville always comes up as the biggest number.
Yeah.
Is that number is it influenced at all by the fact that there are 2 hospitals in Victorville that would be reporting numbers?
I want to say yes. I think that they are influenced by the hospitals, because the hospitals can obviously, at this point now, can do some of their own testing. I think the main thing that it is contingent upon, though, is the amount of testing that goes on in a particular area. One thing that we don't report enough of in our daily updates is where the tests are taking place, which is available from the county. We have that information available. The vast majority is done in Victorville. So you have Victorville with much testing being done. So I think naturally you're going to see more results, positive results out of that. The other issue is that Victorville is the largest city up here. So when you have a community where testing sites are being put in place, when the first high desert testing site was put in or was held over at the fairgrounds, 7th Street was like gridlock, trying to either get in or out of that place. It was, miles and miles down the road, just cars backed up. And I think they've smoothed over that process since then. But I think the vast majority of, if you look at the county's testing numbers, Victorville has the highest amount of tests per city as well. So I think naturally that number is going to skew higher for them for positive tests. What I've seen more recently, outside of noticing that Lucerne Valley doesn't have any cases, which blows my mind, is that hysteria is very much on the rise. And I think that partly testing, the numbers will always go up when tests increase. But you're starting to see spikes in cases in hysteria where it wasn't just a couple weeks ago where they were below 100 cases total, confirmed cases, and now they're pushing toward 400 or 500 cases total. Still a small amount given their population, but not something that I think should be taken lightly either.
Do we have your contact information?
I can give my contact information. I don't have any cards with me because they're all at the office and I can't even go there. I'm barred from my own office. But I can definitely give you my contact information.
The other thing that I don't know if you've thought of it as your group is to get more youth reading, to get them more involved. Do you guys propose something that's going to come soon since so many kids are still home, the teenagers and the little ones?
Yeah, we have some stuff that we've been doing. One of my goals when I came back to the paper was to get more people involved in the paper that were younger, a more diverse group. No offense to anybody here, but we have a lot of old white guys that write for our paper, columnists every week, things like that, and I wanted to get something, get a group of people together that looked much more like the community that I see. So we had an op-ed recently from a 24-year-old Hispanic woman. I've got one that I haven't run yet on racism from a 17-year-old AAE student, incoming senior. The thing that kind of blows my mind, the print readers knew this already. Our online readers don't really know this all that well, I don't think. They didn't even realize that we have an opinion section. So when we put out opinion pieces, there's backlash because they think, why would a newspaper have opinion? Well, it's been that way, at least for our newspaper, since 1937. And the opinion is obviously separate from the news, but it's also an integral part of freedom of the press, to give people a place and a chance to speak their minds where a lot of people can see it, and it then spreads throughout the community. But that is something that we're definitely working on. I just hired a freelancer a couple weeks ago. She's definitely the youngest person on our staff, and she's thankfully providing a female perspective to a newsroom that, for whatever reason, is now all male. Decisions made throughout whatever process, all my reporters are male, and we used to have a much more diverse, gender-wise, a much more diverse group of people. I'm the only white guy though, so I think that also shows the diversity of our community, is that, all of my reporters, my sports reporter would not allow me to call him Hispanic. He's Mexican. He's proud to say that, and I better not ever call him Hispanic. So he's Mexican, and then I have 2 Hispanic reporters. So working on that diversity is difficult though, because I'm not even in a position where I can hire anybody outside of freelancers.
If you could run, and I want your email so I can
Yeah.
just find it. But if we can do elementary age, promoting those readers,
Yeah.
even first grade, second grade, because we're already pushing education on these kids, writing and
Yeah.
reading. So if we can promote that reading of the Daily Press, their local news,
Yeah.
positively, like
Yeah.
not watching the videos and doing that stuff, but elementary, junior high, and high school kids, mentorship, getting
Yeah.
them prepared
Yeah.
for being grown-ups.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to do that. We have plenty of content that runs every week that is not doom and gloom and things like that. We have a lot of history content, things like that. The last thing I'll say is I would be more than happy to, if the students wanted to write letters to the editor on anything that they want to talk about, I'd be more than happy to review those and possibly run those letters. I know we've done that in the past for high school students. I'm willing to do it for any number of students. I want more young people involved in this. It's because it's they who are going to be kind of at the forefront once we're all going. So,
Even though he's an old white guy, please keep Pat Orr
I love
on that
Cabe.
page.
I love Cabe. Pat Orr's a great guy, and as long as he doesn't ask for money, we're going to run. Before you leave, yeah. Already signed it too.